Hey guys, Adam Rose, Vice President, Senior Loan Officer of Western Ohio Mortgage here in Sydney, Ohio. Today is another episode of the Mortgage Guide podcast, and we have a guest speaker today who was actually on the show, I want to say about a year and a half ago or so. It's been a hot second. It's Aaron Barker. He's a professional sales and leadership coach at Southwestern Coaching, and that's the training division of the oldest direct sales company in the country. He has a wealth of experience, ton of knowledge, and he started his career selling educational books and software door to door, and later leading new business ventures for Fortune 500 companies and small businesses in the States, as well as, if I'm not mistaken, abroad as well. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Very good. And which if you want to talk about that a little bit, we can. But what I want to hit on is we're going to be having you as a featured speaker at the Ohio Mortgage Bankers Convention in May, and want to kind of give people a little preview of what you might be talking about, what you do for a living, how you do it, and why your kind of approach to coaching might be a little different than the traditional, right? Thank you for taking the time today and coming on the show. But what I want to start off with is kind of, what does your career entail? How do you do it? How did you become a coach, really, to start with?
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Well, thank you, Adam, dude. I appreciate taking time and going through this with me and also inviting me to speak at that event.
Absolutely. We're super excited about it.
Yeah, dude. I will say, I get so fired up and really passionate about coaching and about the whole process of growth. And I'll tell you real quick why I became a coach, how I became a coach. And, when you mentioned I started my sales career selling educational materials door to door. So this company started during the Civil War selling Bibles door to door, and that's called our company Southwestern Advantage, and that's still around today. Right. So there are still people selling books door to door. In fact, our company's record was broken just a couple years ago after COVID, actually.
Really?
If you can believe that.
Now, that's got to be a tough sell. Going door to door today has to be a challenge.
I will say you grow not only in character, but also in income. It's definitely, you can make money doing it. But whenever that's lacking, we just call those days character building days.
Yeah. I'm sure your self-defense gets pretty good too.
Totally. So you're growing in all directions, and character building tends to be, especially at the beginning, you grow a lot in that.
For sure. I bet.
Yeah. So I found.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to share just how I started in coaching. And when I became a coach, I had got reunited with Dave Brown, who he was with the company selling books door to door. In fact, he was one of the people that broke the record forever ago. And when he approached me, I had actually had a book kid knock on my door, and this was in the summer of 2019. I had someone knock on my door, and oh my gosh, I was so excited. I told my wife, actually said to her, she goes, "Just come back at 6 o'clock." It's all she said, actually, to the book girl. She's like, "Come back at 6." So when she came back, I was like, "Oh my gosh, kids, come hug the book girl. These are the hardest workers." And they talk about that actually in training in sales school, how that will never happen. And it not unless you find an alumnus, then
right.
So she asked me to speak. I agreed to speak their Sunday meeting. I called Dave, who I knew was still at the company, and he gave me some pointers. And then he said, "Man, how'd you like that?" I said, "Dude, that was awesome. I loved it." And he said, "How'd you like to just do that?" And that's how I found the coaching and training division at Southwestern, and became a coach. Been doing this for going on 6 years now.
So in coaching, I'm sure you have a lot of clients that you coach, but what kind of topics do you cover with your clientele that might be a little bit different than the traditional sales coach? Because, and what I mean by different is, I've seen a lot of people selling coaching services, but it's really like hammering people down like numbers, almost like a glorified sales manager is what it seems like sometimes. And I've noticed with my experience with you, it's a little bit of a different approach that I truly appreciate, and I feel like it can be quite life-changing for a lot of people. So what are some of those topics that you talk about with some of your clientele?
Yeah. So one of the first topics we get into, and it really doesn't take much of a deeper conversation. It just takes asking further questions about someone's purpose and about someone's overall vision. And, let's take an industry we're all familiar with in real estate.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're talking with the realtor and you say, hey, you know what? I know you became a realtor um, for a reason. I know there was something behind that decision that probably had a lot to do with freedom and a lot to do with just an ultimate vision of the life you wanted to live. What was that?
Right. Yeah. And so bring it back to why they started.
Bring
Right.
it back to that every one of us gets, if you think about what drives each one of us, we all have a feeling that we
Mm-hmm.
are driving towards. And maybe it's a feeling of that life we wanted or that person we aspire to be, but we all are driven by something internally. And so the topics are that vision, mastery, right?
Right.
And if you think of that as uh driving towards clarifying it, well, along the way to that, you're gonna have goals. Oftentimes when we set goals that we think we should set, or maybe our boss or our manager says this is your goal.
Right. Mm-hmm. But where's
But
it
is
taking you? Is it in line with what you're trying to accomplish? Right. That's the whole
totally
point.
think
Yeah.
about that concept of alignment towards that vision. Is it
Right.
relevant to the vision?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I, when we started working together, I think it was a lot of, hey, I kind of lost my way. I need to get back to the basics and remember why I was doing this. Because once you kind of get into a position in a job, even if it was something you've always wanted to do, I do feel at some point it turns into a bit of a grind for the individual, and you're
Mhm.
just there doing what you need to do to get your job done sometimes, and you kind of just lose that excitement. And then like what you're talking about, creating the vision if you don't have a vision, or just realigning on where you're going to get to your vision, what you really want to accomplish, bringing that back to the forefront is what you do,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Are there What's that, if you don't mind me asking, what's that process look like? Is it a long process? Is it like, hey, there's 30 steps to really hammer this out? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, when you first start to realize that you're taking action and you're following through with things, but maybe the motivation isn't there, or
Hmm.
maybe it's just a little lost, and when you start to realize that you've got an alignment issue, you're a little out of alignment. There's some action taken, but it doesn't have the same gusto. You're not
Right.
yourself, really. When you
Hmm.
start to realize that, the process, and I'll speak to the process in coaching, really is a matter of focusing on what you're doing and why. So I always like to introduce this concept of the be, do, have principle.
I'm
And
not going to
often
remember that. Be, do, have
be,
principle.
do,
Okay.
have, be,
Be,
do,
do,
have.
have. Got
Yeah.
it.
So it's so interesting too when there's this conversation and you get into what someone might be doing, and
Mhm.
you asked about the process. And so in order to get into this process, you really have to realize that that difference you're talking about in coaching
Mhm.
is that the space we aim to provide at Southwestern is a space of non-judgment. It's a space of creativity, and it's a space that ultimately focuses on the who. Think about the concept of the who. So oftentimes what you'll find in either a sales manager or maybe just a production-based coaching, we often find, and our brains get very in tune to the frequency of the what, meaning what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to have? What are your goals?
Right.
Right? And the what that you want to bring about, if somebody shows up, let's say, to a call and they didn't do their numbers, or they didn't hit them, or they didn't track them, or they didn't something they didn't, right? Well, they're going to be pretty apprehensive about bringing that up, being
Sure.
upfront,
Right.
because the thought is, and I've even had people say, like, my coach will say to me, "Hey, if you didn't do the thing, don't even show up." Like, if you didn't do, and it's interesting because there is a place. Now, don't misunderstand. There is a place for training and developing. What we aim to provide in the space of coaching is an ability to focus on the who. So if you think about that concept of the what, and you said, oh man, I didn't do my, no, I didn't track them or whatever I didn't do. I was supposed to do it and I didn't do. There's going to be that feeling like I'm not going to bring that up. At Southwestern, we really try to provide the space of non-judgment. So if you show up, you didn't do it. We're just going to ask, well, what do you think about that?
Right.
How do you want to handle that? What does that
So,
reflect in you?
right. So when we're talking about the who is really kind of just rediscover who you are and why you're doing what you're doing and what you love and you know what I
Definitely.
mean? Everything about
Definitely.
you,
So
basically.
if you went about and you didn't do the numbers or you did something else, let's say you're like, you know what, coach, I know I said I was going to call this many people
Yeah.
or I was going to hit this number, but you know what I did is I got on Facebook or I got on this or I started posting that. Okay, tell me about that. Why did that reflect your desire at the moment? Why
Mhm.
did that have the understanding of that was going to get you? Rather than judging like, oh, well, you know what? Looks like we're going to need some different accountability around you to actually get you corrected, as if to say that there's a correction need to be made. We focus just on the who. And how does that reflect who you wanted to be?
Right. No, that's great. I mean, that's a totally different approach, in my opinion, than most services I've seen out there, which is why I think we connected so well. But with that, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes with it. Of course, we've talked about vision, and there's a lot of tools that go along with your vision, right? We talked about vision boards
Totally.
and vision trains and how we're going to get there, but we really got to set where we want to go. What are we
Hmm.
trying to accomplish? And as you and I have discussed before, it's not just professional
Hmm.
necessarily, right? What we're trying to accomplish in our career, but it could be family, it could be anything, right?
Yep.
And how we want to come about doing that, and then putting steps in place on really reaching those goals, and always keeping that vision in mind with anything that we do. So with that, we're not hammering on sales numbers or anything. Do any success stories come to mind when discussing your approach to coaching and how you coach people? Is there like ever been a really good testimonial that stands out to you?
Yeah, so I work with a loan officer, and her name's Corey. And I will say, when I first got introduced to Corey, she was doing awesome, and she had been in her field for 20 years. She was obviously, the market had its challenges, but she
Hmm.
was right where she wanted to be. And in fact, our first conversation, she had said no. And
Sounds familiar.
sounds familiar. It took Adam a couple no's, Aaron actually a couple no's to get through. No, the conversation changed and actually started to take that shape that we talked about earlier about what she was open to having a different question. And I just asked her what her vision is all I asked is what's your vision? What do you want out of life? And, and it kind of stumped her a little bit, because that actually opened the door for what she wanted at the very beginning of her career. So we started talking, we did a little bit of a deeper dive into this picture and this image of who she wanted to be in as a sales producer, but she had some different ideas of what sales even meant. There was some ideas of sales that weren't very appealing, that were like, okay, I know we have to sell, but I just don't like that connotation. And so there were some things to get over, some things to actually dig into and understand. So, dude, we did this and we got into the things that she thinks and how she wants to think. I asked her, "Can we please make a focus in coaching on how you want to think? How you currently think and how that's serving your overall vision and purpose?" And I said, we are going to change things that we do. Definitely. We're going to change schedule. We're going to change some scripting. We're going to change some ways that we approach what we do. We're going to talk about what you do that is your superpower, so to speak. And we're going to talk about those things. But what we're also going to do is talk about the way of thinking. And one of them was that selling is a service. Selling is helping people make decisions that are best for them. and you are not doing any persuading or convincing or doing any bugging or pesting. What you're
Right.
doing is you're allowing an environment for someone to see something they may not have and choose it.
Right. Be factual and honest and let the client decide what they want to do. Right. I mean,
Completely.
that's in a nutshell. I mean, that really isn't selling. Do you have to make people aware of what you do and how you help people? Sure.
Yeah.
But are you forcing a sale of a product? No.
No,
Right.
no. In fact, the mission we're on, and when we talk in Southwestern, we talk to groups, we say we are here to elevate the practice and perception of
Mm,
sales, to elevate sales. We have that on our workshops that we give, because the truth is we are here to elevate the perception. Most people define sales in that way, as sort of making something look better than it is. Oh, you're really going to sell it to me, aren't you? You're selling that. He's selling it hard, isn't he?
right.
And right, like that
Yeah.
is so common for us to think that to sell something is to make it look better than it is. The truth is, if something is valuable, it has value in it. Giving people the time to find it and then match it, that's what we do. And that's what she started to shift her thinking around. She did raise a ton of her income. Definitely that happened. But the biggest thing was she said, Aaron, I really feel like I can tackle this work-life balance challenge because I made a ton of more money. And I love that. But I really feel like the way of thinking I have about my balance in my schedule, I need to change that way of thinking. And yes, made money and that's great. The best and biggest thing was that she had that foundation of the ability to shift her thinking. She was like, I know I can do it. I can do anything. We can definitely have a basically have our cake and eat it too. That
Right.
can be a lifestyle of a high production, high contribution to society, but also very peaceful and balanced.
Right. So when you run into that and you're coaching these individuals, is there a way to truly measure? Is it simply off to how the individual feels and how their outlook on life has changed? I mean, sometimes you're going to see it in sales anyways, right? Actual numbers and income increasing, of course.
Mhm.
But the thing of the work-life balance, how do we measure that? Do we feel like it's just simple conversation on how it's going? Is it like we've talked about stress levels, right? We don't
Yep.
like the word stress. It's something we don't want to talk
Yeah.
about. How
Mhm.
do we measure some of that stuff?
So I'll talk about two things that we can use. One is our actual schedule.
Hmm.
Okay, so think about the difference between a calendar and a schedule. I'll do that difference real quick. When you think about a calendar, okay, like we have an appointment or something's in the calendar, the agreements we've made and the expectations of the world around us is represented in the calendar.
Right.
The schedule, however, has a different mentality to it. The schedule is our convicted decisions. It's essentially us saying, this is how I want to show up to life. This is what I'm committed to. Now, obviously, it should reflect the calendar well, in that we should be able to commit to the things we already said we were going to do. But then there's those white spaces in between. And if you ask yourself, how often have I really tracked my time? How often have I kept track of what I do and how I do it? So when you talk about measurements,
Hmm.
yeah, you can definitely measure your ability to live a balanced and peaceful life based on your actual schedule and calendar.
Very
It
good.
might not reflect very well in the calendar, but it definitely will reflect if you take the discipline to create a schedule, which is you telling the world what you're going to do or what you did. That's one way we measure.
Very good. Yeah.
I'll give
I
you
know
the
I
other way.
started doing it. I remember one of the homework pieces
Yeah.
was literally marking down everything I did and during the time frames of which I did it. And
Yeah.
it was insanity though. You know what I mean? Like the amount of work you can accomplish because a lot of people always have that 10 minutes a day. They're like, I don't want to start the next thing. I got 10 minutes. Well, during that 10 minutes, what else can you fit in there? If you're
Mhm.
actually prepared for your day, you can squeeze something that you had later in your calendar or something like schedule, right? Into that 10-minute slot to still accomplish your goals throughout the day, but maybe be more efficient. right? Like
Completely.
we talk about making cold calls or calling agents or following up with clients or something like that. So being efficient, having your list together already and prepared, you can fill those time slots if you are actually controlling your schedule and not it controlling you.
Yep.
Which is, I think, a challenge that so many people face.
Yep.
So,
Man, I'll tell you, when you think about the schedule and its purpose, the purpose of that schedule is to be a tool for you to live out your purpose, to live out your vision, to really propel you toward that vision. Oftentimes we think of the schedule as a thing that needs to be strictly adhered to. That is, in oftentimes people's mind, the goal, to live out the schedule, to do what I said, follow it strictly. Like, why would I make a schedule if the goal wouldn't be to do everything right? And that can present
right,
a pretty high stress to us to
right.
have to do everything. Its design is to protect what grows. That's its design. And to the degree in which it does that, that's how we measure it.
So much info. So much.
Just dropping all of it, dude.
All the truth bombs. But you know what? We also can't show everybody what you do and how you do it. That would be like a free coaching session here, which we can't do.
Listen. We believe in giving quality information for free. Okay.
Yeah. Very good. But we will go ahead and do you have anything else good for the order that you want to talk to our listeners to?
Well, let's just say for those who tend to be more of a detective, like I am, who
Sure.
are analytical in that they would say, "Hey, you said two, but you only gave one. I'll give the second one."
Ah, yes. Very good. Yeah.
There you go.
Totally missed it.
We do an ideal wheel, and there are different spokes of your life. I actually did this with a guy named Chris, who Chris is really intentional about the many areas of his life. However, I knew there's areas that were really important to him, and so we have an ideal wheel, but it has 7 things already predetermined. I just gave him the freedom to create his own 7 or 6 or 5. I just gave him the freedom. Hey, create your own categories. What would they be for you? Maybe it's marriage, maybe it's fatherhood, maybe it's your career, and maybe there's something else in there for mentality, whatever it is. And so he created those categories, and then he did create what we call controllable, in a sense, controllable things that bolster up those categories that will lead to a more well-balanced, well-rounded wheel and more efficient ride through life. You don't want a bumpy ride through life, and you also don't want to have to be pedaling 1,000 RPMs or whatever it is.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Right? So that's one way we do it as well.
Very cool. Yeah, I actually remember that method at the very beginning as well. But we really do appreciate your time today, Aaron, and we look forward to you speaking at the Ohio Mortgage Bankers Convention in May. And you're going to be our featured speaker, I believe, on that first Monday, if I'm not mistaken. And I know you're going to provide a lot of great insight and hopefully help a lot of people along the way, and maybe get some more people interested in looking at what we do a little bit differently. Because like we've talked about, it's a very high stress environment and people can take that the wrong way, but changing the way they think and why they do what they do can be such a tremendous help for everybody, health wise, mentally, time wise, and accomplish everything they want to accomplish just by changing the way they think. And your insight is fantastic. It's always amazing. So thank you again for taking the time to come on the show today, and we will get this blasted out so everybody can check you out and get ready for the convention. But that's all we have for you guys this week. Thank you again, Aaron, for coming on. Remember to subscribe on YouTube. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can also check us out on TikTok. Not my favorite platform, but check it out. And we'll catch you guys all next week.